Hello everybody, this is Peter Svidler with the highlights video of round one of the Vaikanzeya 2017 tournament. And round one was a relatively quiet affair, and the one game we expected to potentially provide some fireworks did end up being the obvious choice for this highlight video. When we were doing our predictions round before the round started, I was quite confidently predicting draws in most games, apart from this one, in which my choice was some kind of a result, but with white being favored, and I probably should actually show you which game I'm in. It is a game in which Pavel Eljanov was white against Eljanov-Rapport, and as you can see on your screen, Pavel has a very good score against Richard, 1 draw and 3 victories with no losses for the Ukrainian. And we thought that Richard generally doesn't pull punches very much, and we expected him to go for the trademarked Rapport stuff from the very beginning in this tournament, and he did not disappoint. So let's go into the game. Pavel started with knight f3, e6, already a very funky choice, so to speak, from Richard, giving white a tremendous breadth of opportunities here. As the arrows indicate, you can make either one of the 3 developing moves, taking control of the center here. Perhaps e4 is the least likely of them, but d4 and c4 are both very normal. Pavel, though, continued playing it coy, playing g3 here, c5, bishop g2, knight c6, and the move which we really felt like this was a bait of some sort here, because in particular for me, someone who's been playing the Grunfeld my entire life, and also started towards the later part of my career to play one knight f3 very seriously. The option of playing d4 here would have been very attractive, simply for the reason that Black has already committed to playing e6, and the way to refute d4, well, not refute, but pose problems against an early d4 in positions like this, generally is connected with playing e7, e5 in one tempo. And against 4d4, Black is actually, I think, limited to playing the Grunfeld a tempo down, which gives white a very comfortable position, and I think decent chances for advantage even. But Pavel instead played c4, allowing Richard to do exactly what Richard immediately has done in reply, namely g7, g5, which is, it looks weird, but it is actually a bit of a Rapport specialty. He really likes these long fianchettos, so to speak, gaining space, also creating options of chasing the knight away from f3. And in this particular case, I think it's actually very playable. The point being that if white plays d4 straight away, g4, knight e5, c takes d4, knight c6, and dc6 is a very strong reply, and white might even struggle winning that pawn back. Pavel went d3, h6. It's way too early to play g4. You need to wait until white actually challenges the g5 pawn. Knight c3, bishop g7, and here Pavel decided to make sure that his kingside is relatively secure, and there's not going to be a pawn storm along the h-file perhaps later in the game, by playing h4, g4, knight d2, d6, e3. Here h5 is a playable move, but Richard is not really someone who hesitates to grab more space by making a more committal structural decision. So f5, knight b3. A sensible plan. White tries to challenge the black center as early as possible. If like a3, knight g7, rook b1, I mean castles and rook b1, it's very difficult to imagine that this plan of pushing b4 is even particularly dangerous for black. But also black can sort of stop it completely by playing a5, and these light pieces on the white queen side, in particular the knight on d2 and the bishop on c1, are not really doing very much here. So Pavel went knight b3, knight g7, and d4. at least trying to challenge the black center as early as possible. But b6 solves these issues very comfortably here. It's a move black generally wants to make. Both bishop b7 and bishop a6 are very much part of black's future plans. And tactically, if you play g5 here, which looks attractive for about 1 second, sorry, d5, yeah. This is very strongly replied to by bishop takes c3, bc, and knight e5. And yeah, the bishop on c1 is completely dead here, and accepting the exchange sacrifice is suicidal, because in this position, yeah, white's position is just a ruin, and he's completely lost. Because of that, castles had been played in the game, and here Pavel played queen e2, a move which we expected to happen, and we thought queen e2 with connected with the idea of rook d1 is by far the most critical move in this position. Once again, trying to create threats as early as possible and not give black time to finish development and play something, for instance, like bishop a6 and rook c8. And black had a number of options here. e5 is what Richard eventually opted for, and it's a very understandable move and a very decent move as well. But he could also play it slower, for instance, by playing a6, rook d1, queen c7. The point of the move a6 being to stop knight c3, b5, and secure the c7 square for the queen. This was also very playable. But e5 is not a poor move by any means. It challenges the white center, and perhaps more importantly, it creates a very serious positional idea of playing e5, e4, completely locking the g2 bishop in and making sure that white doesn't really have any active plans whatsoever. Pavel played rook d1, keeping the pressure and inviting some trades in the center, which would at least somewhat revive his bishop on c1, at least hopefully. If instead you play d5, black just goes back to b8, and white is stuck with a number of pieces here which don't make a ton of sense. e4 is once again a potential problem, and if you play e4 yourself after f4, you really are in a world of trouble, because black suddenly has very serious attack on the king's side. Rook d1, c takes d4 to black. Knight g5, this was the point of white playing rook d1. If you take on d4, both e4 and f4 are possible, but I think e4 was very likely what Richard was planning here. This position is not that clear, but I think long term black has a lot of trumps. He can go for instance, for a plan of h5, knight g6, and then later try to play for f5, f4. Also d6, d5 on the next move might be a very decent idea, further strengthening the center. Pavel played knight g5, and this is perhaps the first very critical moment of the game where, and also I guess the moment where Richard settled on a plan which was perhaps not the best. Somewhat surprisingly, considering his style and the way he generally approaches chess, instead of a very attractive move bishop a6, which continues to offer the exchange sacrifice, and white probably needs to accept it here. And in this position, there is a number of moves black can make. Queen c6 is an interesting option. Queen c8, which also creates a potential idea of f5, f4, because by placing it on c8, black gets the g4 pawn under control. After all of these moves, the position is very unclear, and it's very playable for black. Perhaps black might even be better here. It was also possible just to play e4 here and take on e7 with the queen, making sure that the structure that occurred in the game does not actually appear on the board. Let's say knight takes d4, and you can play knight e5 here, and you get a much better version of the same structure as in the game. You can also maybe make an argument for knight takes d4, e takes d4, and something like bishop a6 here, trying to challenge the white center straight away with an unclear position. But Richard played d3, which was connected with a very interesting idea as well, but an idea that proved to be less precise, and as mentioned, the beginning of his troubles. Queen d3, e4, knight e7. Now, unfortunately for black, he can no longer take on e7 with the queen because of queen d5 check. Knight takes e7. And here, it was possible to take on d6 because after the recapture and bishop e6, which I suspect was Richard's plan, white probably is in time to stabilize here by playing knight g4, rook d8 takes, and bishop f1. And black never really wants to take on d4 with the bishop, and he is not really in time to do anything else. White has a very simple plan, for instance, of a4 and a5. And it would appear that white would have some advantage here. But Pavel approached this in a more structured fashion. He decided not to trade the queens and to keep playing against the black weaknesses, assuming that he, because of the weakened black king side and the pawn on d6, which will become a target once he finishes development, that he should always have better long-term prospects. And it was proven to be correct, although I think Richard was not particularly precise with his move orders here. Bishop a6 is already maybe a slightly an unnecessary move because, as you will see, black will eventually put it back on b7, but it will be pretty much a wasted tempo to play bishop a6. Knight d4. This is an excellent piece. Right now it's threatening knight e6, as you can see, but also all these arrows indicate very comfortable plans that white now has at his disposal. In particular, during the live commentary, I kept on insisting that a knight on d4 is nice, but it will be particularly good once it gets transferred to f4. And we will see this theme later in the game. Also, white wants to play b3 and bishop b2, and the bishop on c1, which had no prospects for large portions of this game, will finally find some play. Knight c6, I'm already not quite sure about this move. Maybe it was better to try playing something like b5 to at least get the a6 bishop in the game. But knight c6, knight e5 looks very, very normal and very attractive. Aiming for knight d3, also in some positions aiming for knight f3 check. And here the move I mentioned earlier, knight e2, is very, very strong. The knight is handed over to f4, which, for instance, if black plays knight f3 check, you can even take and play knight f4. And because this knight is there, black never gets any play connected with f4 and queen h3. And the position is, frankly, probably just strategically lost because there is no counterplay. And the bishop on a6 is so poor that white will just be able to crush his opponent on the queen side and in the center. Therefore, knight f3 check is not really an option anymore. Knight f4 is coming against almost any move. And after knight d3, bishop g7, queen g7, white has a wide variety of very pleasant options. And during the live broadcast, I was very heavily advocating for rook b1, but perhaps the move Pavel made is also quite decent. My point, though, was that the knight really does belong only on f4, and there's really no reason to move it away from its designated square. And it's also very worth noting that white really does not want to trade the knight on d3 for the knight on e2. I think it's not that the knight on d3 is worth a rook, it's that the knight on f4 will be worth more than a rook. Therefore, white's plan here should be, in most cases, just to take on d3 straight away. And because of that, I felt that rook b1, preparing rook takes d3, was a very, very good move. And we thought that bishop b7 is maybe the only choice black has. And then after all the captures, you get a position very similar to the one players got in the game. But white will play a knight f4 in one tempo and will not have to cycle the knight back. But the game continued knight d4, rook a8, rook bishop b7, takes. And the knight went back to e2, which is, once again, sort of the point I was trying to make. White's position is so solid that the waste is maybe a strong word, but the slight inefficiency in getting the knight to f4 perhaps doesn't really matter. But I did feel that starting with rook b1 was maybe saving white half a tempo somewhere. The position is still a lot better for white here, especially in practical play, because Black is struggling to find any kind of counterplay. The king on g8 is very, very weak, whereas the king on g1, when the knight is on f4, feels completely safe. There are no pawn breaks available to black at all. So black really needs to just patiently wait for white to improve, which is something that Richard probably wasn't very eager to do. And his position collapsed a lot faster than it really should have done in this position. Rook f6, knight f4, queen e4, queen d2, rook c8, perhaps hoping for some counterplay with b5 followed by rook c2. But Pavel controls this. He is in no hurry whatsoever. He plays a4. In some positions, a5 might become an idea, but mainly I think this does a very good job of controlling the potential pawn breaks. Rook c5, rook d1, queen f3. This already is sort of sowing the seeds of black's destruction. But after knight d5, I guess the final mistake is playing rook f7. Something like rook e6 may have been slightly better, but already black's position looks very, very suspect because the rook on c5, I don't think it ever should have been there. I think it's black should maybe have aimed to keep that rook on e5, one on f6, one on e5. If white goes knight d5, you go rook f7, although even that position would be really, really unpleasant to play in practical sense. But as it happened, after rook f7, Pavel played queen c2, and suddenly it becomes glaringly obvious that the queen on f3 is stuck. The very simple plan is rook d4 followed by rook f4, simply picking that queen up. And if you play queen e4 straight away, white just takes fe and goes rook d4, and the pawn on e4 falls, and white will have two pawns and continued dominance all over the board. So that position has to be close to winning. But it probably was better than what Richard opted to do. He played a6, I guess with the idea of meeting, knight takes b6 is what Pavel played, but after rook d4, black plays b5, and the cruel machine suggests that after queen d3 there really is no defense against rook f4 and white is completely winning. But currently rook f4 is impossible because of queen takes d5, so I guess Richard felt maybe a6 creates some opportunities to play for tricks. But both rook d4 and knight takes b6, frankly, are just totally winning for white. Queen e4. In this position, I was arguing during the live show for just taking and playing b4, which should be objectively winning, but it might take a while. Instead, Pavel played queen c3, queen e5, rook d4, a5, queen d3, rook c6, knight d5. And white's position is overwhelmingly winning here. He will eventually start picking up all the weaknesses he can play here against. And Richard played knight g3, making sure that white controls all the squares, rook f6, rook d5. And in this position, having made the time control, Richard, I guess, did not really spend too much time wondering because everything collapses, the a5 pawn is gone, and then white will have a pleasant choice of either continuing to attack the weaknesses on the king side or just queening his huge pawn majority on the queen side. So Richard just resigned here. The only decisive game of the day in the Masters, there were a number of games which ended in victories for players in the Challengers, but in the Masters, this is the only decisive game of the round. It has been a reasonably quiet round, but I'm sure the action will pick up, and I'm sure Richard will continue to drive the action. I'm very confident that the loss in the first round will not make him play in a significantly different manner. He is I think very, very consistent in going for as full-blooded a struggle as possible in every single game. And we will continue watching it with great interest, and we wish him well, because I think without him this tournament will be much the poorer. This has been Peter Svidler with the highlight video of round 1 of Tata Steel Vikings A 2017. Thanks for watching.